Welcome to the Delight in the Limelight live stream show. I'm your host, Linda Ugalo, a speaking confidence coach and author of the book, Delight in the Limelight. I want you to be able to delight in the limelight wherever it is you speak or put yourself out there. And one of the places we put ourselves out there is visually through images. But how do you feel about having your photo taken? Is it something that you look forward to as an opportunity to have fun and express yourself? Or does it fill you with anxiety? My guest on this live broadcast is branding photographer Raj Bandyopadhyay. Raj is a former data scientist turned personal branding photographer who helps speakers and entrepreneurs convey their multifaceted, vibrant stories and selves on camera. He's passionate about helping people feel safe to express themselves fully as human beings and also to build a deep, genuine, lasting connection with their audience. Doesn't that sound good? Now, we both help people to be themselves, comfortable in their skin and expressing themselves, but that's not where people start with. So, Raj, first, I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks so much for coming on with me.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited about this conversation.
Yes, yes, because so many people do struggle with getting their photos taken. If you don't struggle and you're listening to this, but you want to deepen your experience to make it a peak experience, stay on and hang out with us because we're going to run through the whole spectrum. We're going to start with where people tend to start, which is feeling insecure,
Mhm.
right? And so tell me what you have found or what you've uncovered as the kinds of fears and insecurities that people have when it comes to getting in front of the camera.
Yeah. So, first of all, most people, 99% of people in the world, in my opinion, are afraid of the camera. Sometimes that might be very visible, where they're like, oh, I don't want to be in front of the camera. But there might be some people who are like, who seem comfortable on the surface, but they're terrified inside. And this is
Mm.
often true even of professional models or actors. Who you might think are very, very comfortable, making their living in front of the camera. So if you're one of the people who feels nervous in front of the camera, I mean, that is perfectly, completely normal. Not that different from be getting on stage, which is also a very scary experience for many people. Now, where does it come from? There are a lot of different things that people tell me about that fear when I ask them, what exactly this are you afraid of? Sometimes it can be things like, I don't think I look good in front of the camera. I just, I don't have the right kind of body. I don't look like a model. I don't know how to pose. There are all kinds of like, I don't know how to be spontaneous. As I've been hearing these fears for the last few years, I've realized they kind of fall into four kind of buckets. And I'm going to state them, and you might relate to some or even all of them. And I encourage you to be curious about like which one is landing for you, because I also believe that those four buckets reflect the kinds of fears that we have in other parts of life, right? Like, because what our fears or insecurities don't just show up in front of the camera. It's the camera sometimes is an amplification mechanism for that, but
Yeah,
they
that's
show
what
up.
I feel about speaking as well, is that the fears
Exactly.
that we have
Exactly.
around speaking and also in front of the camera, because I help people get comfy on camera. Uh, yeah, it's one of the great things about working on the fear of this thing is that then when you take care of it, it solves all these other issues.
Right, right.
Yeah,
It shows up in like many other parts of life. So let's
yeah.
go into them. The
Let's go into
first,
the buckets.
the buckets. The
The
first bucket
buckets.
is worthy or worthiness. Now, worthiness comes up as I am not worthy of being in or doing this photo shoot or being on stage or whatever that thing is, because that's sometimes a reflection of I'm not worthy of doing this work that I'm talking about. And maybe you're a coach, a consultant, a speaker, or something else, like that you're doing some valuable work in the world for your audience, but you might not feel that way. You might, and that comes from like not feeling worthy in other aspects of life too. There is that insecurity. So that can, that sort of imposter syndrome, if you have that in other aspects of life, might show up as a reluctance to be visible in front of a camera. The second bucket is what I
I,
call,
I just want I just want to reframe that. I'm thinking as you're speaking. I think that people might think to themselves, "Who am I?
who am I?
Who am I to do this?"
Mhm.
Other people are more this or that.
Right. I
Yes.
agree.
So
I mean, I've faced that myself when
yeah,
I started out in this new role of a photographer. I was like, who am I to question how photography is done, or like when I
right,
have a point of view, and same
right,
things, right?
right,
I was
right.
afraid to put out my own work in the beginning for the same
Hmm.
reason. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, what is work? Why would people want to work with me? Like I remember that being there. And
yeah.
so that's number one.
That's bucket one. Bucket
Bucket
two.
one. Bucket two is a fear of vulnerability, because when you are putting yourself out there, you're also putting yourself out either in reality or in perception of people judging you in some way. So the fear of vulnerability can often show up as perfectionism. Like my pictures need to look perfect, where perfect is defined by some social standard. Like I need to look, whatever the beauty standard is. My body needs to look perfect. My hair needs to look perfect. My clothes need to look perfect. My house needs to look perfect. My dogs and kids need to look perfect. You see that a lot of that aesthetic on Instagram, where everything needs to look perfect, especially in branding, and we constantly compare ourselves with like, oh, that particular person I follow looks perfect, so I must look perfect too. So ultimately perfectionism is a fear of vulnerability and the fear of people judging you, and it's it that also shows up in many aspects of our life. I wonder if that's something that your speaking clients relate to, Linda.
Oh, yeah. So for sure. I mean, I don't think of it so much as vulnerability. But I do work with the idea of perfectionism, and certainly people who are, let's say, in school they did really well
Hmm.
and they became identified with the person who was always at the top of the grade. Now you got to remember that being at the top of the grade means you made the fewest mistakes.
Right.
So it's not about expressing yourself, it's not about exploration, it's about meeting a certain person, a certain teacher's expectation or the
Yeah.
test expectation of what that is. So I think a lot of people do struggle with the idea if they feel like they have been loved and appreciated and valued for always being at, a high achiever and doing the best, then it feels very scary
Right.
to show yourself as even a 97 compared to 100 feels like a failure. And I've
Exactly.
had clients tell me that who are
Yeah.
like in the C-suite.
Yeah.
So yes, that's how I see it expressed in how I think about it. Mhm.
Exactly. And often perfectionism shows up in being self-critical in photography, especially
Mhm.
around bodies. And it is true that we all constantly get messages about from society and media on how we should be. And I imagine that women in particular get that even a bigger dose of that message all the time. And so it shows up a lot of as self-criticism of like, I don't have a good body. I'm overweight. I'm too old. I don't have good clothes. Like all kinds of things show up as objections in photo shoot, which are a reflection of this kind of fear of vulnerability or this draw to perfectionism. So that is my second bucket:
Mhm.
vulnerability, perfectionism.
Mhm.
The third bucket of worries is safety. Now, safety can mean both physical safety, but also emotional safety. Like, because a photo shoot for most people, a professional photo shoot is a very unfamiliar situation. And you are there with, what seems to be, one or more strangers, and you're kind of showing some side of yourself. And for people who've not had experiences of safety in their life, always, that can feel like a very terrifying situation. Both physically, like, oh, what is this new space I'm in? I'm this, like, they're unfamiliar people, but also emotional safety. Like, am I going to be taken care of, right? When I'm putting
Yeah.
myself out there.
Yeah.
So that can be a concern for having a safe space, like physical or emotional. And then
Yes.
the fourth bucket is what I call freedom, which is, can I express myself the way I want? Often this shows up for my clients as, oh, like I know I'm supposed to look professional, but I don't really wear suits. I don't want to do that. Or can I wear like more colorful clothes? I don't think I can in a professional photo. Can I wear jewelry? Can I wear something else? Or do I have to pose in these particular poses? I don't think my body can do that. Or I don't know how to do that. So there are these ideas of what photos, good photos should look like, and you feel constrained by those conventions or restrictions because you don't feel like you fit into that and you don't feel like you have any other choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I love how you put these into different buckets. Yeah, and we'll dive into these a little bit more because let's take um, let's take the safety one
Hmm.
because, like, as a photographer, you want to create a safe space for
Right.
your clients
Hmm.
and anyone who's listening to this. You want a safe space with your photographer, so you're going to want to be able to vet the person that you're going to be working with for
Hmm.
certain things in order to ensure that you're going to have an experience that supports you in feeling safe. So what goes into feeling safe in your mind, Raj, and what do you do or help
Yeah.
your clients with?
So a lot of the feeling safety actually comes before the photo shoot for me. It's about having conversations that are clear and in some sense vulnerable from both sides to create trust and safety. Like getting to know my client and ultimately, putting the client at the center. That's actually not that common in photography or many other services because we think of ourselves sometimes as the experts, like I'm the expert photographer with the vision, or there's this idea that the photographer is the artist with the vision. And this is probably true for many other service providers, whether you're an accountant or a financial planner or a lawyer or anything like that. But ultimately, as a service provider, my job is about making the client look good and helping my client realize their vision. So I have to put my client at the center of of everything I do, which means really kind of taking the time to help them articulate their vision before the shoot, like taking the time to listen, be empathetic, be non-judgmental. That's a big one. Creating a space where they can share anything and it's not going to be like, I'm not going to go like, oh, that's not okay, or like that's weird, or nothing like that. It's like, we're going to try it. Everything is welcome because it's your vision that you're putting out there. That all happen, happens during the planning process before the session.
Mhm.
During the session, there's this idea often, like, many of my clients, when they talk about their past photo shoot experiences, they say, oh, I went to a photo shoot, I took a few outfits, and the photographer told me, go stand there, do that, go stand there, do, and smile, like against that wall, or sit there and smile. And I felt like they weren't really listening to me, or I didn't get what I really wanted. And I think it's important for my on me again as a service provider to put my ego aside and be like, is this working for you? Constantly encourage them to speak up. And I try to, even at the beginning of the session, I'm very clear. You can speak up anytime you want if something's not working for you. We can take a break. This is your session. I always have an assistant in my session who typically is trained in some kind of coaching modality who helps me also hold that space for
Mm.
my clients, because sometimes I'm caught up in getting the shot, but my assistant's job is to be an advocate for the client. Because what happens sometimes is that in photography somehow brings that out where people get into my clients sometimes, and most people get into like a little bit of a people pleasing mode where they want to impress the photographer, or they want to do the right thing, but it might actually not be working for them. So there are like sometimes these reactions that happen that might be like a freezing or a dissociation that I need to keep an eye on and encourage them to kind of step out of that and be present,
Yeah.
because you're only going to be present when something is working for you.
Yeah. So what kinds of things might that assistant or coach be saying to the client?
Right. So sometimes I do that, sometimes the assistant do that. It's like, it looks like you've stopped breathing. Let's see what's going on for you. Like, take a deep breath. It looks like you are a little bit, your body language is a little bit, you're doing the pose, but your body language feels a little bit checked out. Are you sure you're okay? Is this working for you? Let's take, sometimes they might just notice something and be like, hey, Raj, let's take a 5-minute water break. And they
Mhm.
might go talk to the client and see like if
Mhm.
they're okay or if something needs to change.
Mhm.
So even those little things, like
Mhm.
having somebody advocate for those, creates that extra sense of safety.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
client knowing that they can stop things at any time. They're not beholden to my wishes there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
actually the other way.
I'll tell you what works for me.
Hmm.
One of the so I have a framework that I work within called the Inner Freedom Framework, and the second piece of it, the first piece is to reveal and heal impacting past experiences. So that's kind of like looking at the insecurities and seeing what the root causes may be and clearing them. But the second piece is about safety, and what I've learned in my work and in my programs is that we can create environmental safety by letting people know what what's working, what
Hmm.
we like, what feels strong, what's
Yeah.
exciting. And so what works for me when and I just recently had a photo shoot. I adore photo shoots now. Didn't always, but I do
Yeah.
now. It's a peak experience for me, and we can go into that later. But what works for me is when um, either the photographer or the in this last instance, I had like a branding person there with me, and one of them would say, "Love what you're doing. Such a
Right.
natural. That smile is fantastic." Another photographer used to say, "The camera loves you." And it was just like this, like
Right.
continually reflecting back all the good things that they see and what I'm doing. I love that expression. I love what you did with your shoulders. Nice turn of the head or whatever it is,
Yeah.
that that lets me know what's working, what I'm doing that's really coming across,
Hmm.
and it's encouraging,
Exactly.
and it makes me want to expand more.
Exactly, exactly. And sometimes, like, what I will do, like, it depends on the client. Some clients are like, I trust you. I don't want to see anything until you edit it. But sometimes it helps clients to, like, if I get a really good photo I'm excited about, to show them what
Yeah,
at the back of the camera. It's like, this is what we're going for, and this is why this photo is good. And they'll see it
yeah,
and you can see the change. It's like,
yeah.
oh, I can actually do this. This
Yeah.
is fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then,
exactly.
yeah,
And when you say, "Whoa, these are good. Take a look."
yeah.
And people say, "Oh, this is good. Oh, yeah." And then it kind of like builds in lifting, elevating the whole experience.
Right. And that goes hand in hand with also letting them know that they can change something if that doesn't work.
Mhm.
Sometimes there'll be like photo that I like and I show them and they're like, ah, I don't like something there. And it's important to know that they have the freedom to
Yes.
to say that. And I'm not
Yes.
going to be offended. No one's going to be offended. That's going to be, in fact, that's the kind of feedback that I want because ultimately I want to fulfill their vision.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's cool. So, what would you suggest to someone who is going to be hiring
Hmm.
a photographer? What kind of questions would you suggest that they consider asking in order to make sure that the photographer they're working with is this type of person that's gonna put them first?
Right. So, first of all, as a meta thing, notice, if you're hiring a branding photographer, it's your story, it's your brand as the client. So ultimately, they need to be curious about you. Sometimes if you meet a photographer who's just like, all right, show up at this place at this time, bring three outfits, and we'll do a shoot. That's a good sign that they haven't taken the time to actually get to know you in any way, or like look at your brand or your disco or thank you, Lisa. I'm glad you're enjoying the conversation. Uh, Look at your brand or to get to know your brand or get to know you as a person. I think that already should be, especially if you're doing it for branding, it should be a red flag that this is not someone who's putting my needs at the center,
Right,
right?
if they're not asking you those kinds of questions and
Right. Even
yeah.
like even some basic questions about like who's your audience, what do you want to
Mhm,
convey in your brand?
mhm,
What are your do you have like branding colors or anything like that? Right. I
mhm.
mean, there are plenty of photographers. You might still get good photos from photo shoots like that. Don't get me wrong, but you're missing out on opportunities to do something that's really aligned with who what your brand is. So there's a difference between just doing regular portraits and doing a branding photo session, because there is a story you want to tell in a branding photo session. So
Hmm.
that's the first thing to notice. Are they actually curious
Yep.
about you?
Yep.
The second thing to notice is when you push back against something. Say they suggest an idea like, oh, maybe we should do a photo with this pose and with this background or something, and that doesn't work for you in some way. If you push back and you say, no, maybe that doesn't work for me, can we try something different? How receptive are they to that feedback? And you would imagine that they should be, because they're a service provider, but you'd be surprised at the number of photographers who have a big artistic ego, and where they feel they are people who might be like, oh, I'm the expert here, and they might get offended by that or something. And that again is a red flag. It's like, oh, like if somebody doesn't accept my feedback about my brand and how
Hmm.
I want my vision to look like, then, or even has a conversation about it,
Yeah.
then that's all. I mean, it may be that they are right, the photographer
Yeah.
is right, but they should
Yeah.
be able to explain to you and say, oh, I don't, I like what you're saying, but this might not work for this artistic reason,
Yeah.
or whatever
Yeah.
technical reason. And that's fine. But they need to listen to you and
Right. Right.
encourage you to communicate your vision.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then during the photo, it's always worth asking what the photo shoot kind of environment will be like. Like,
Hmm.
where is the location? If the location is somewhere like in your control or place, that's great. But if it's like a studio or something else, like, who's going to be there, what's the situation, how the shoot is going to go, what's the kind of outline or agenda or the plan for the session.
Hmm.
Again, it's not about, there's no right answer for that, because
Right.
this is a creative process,
Yeah.
but you want your photographer or anyone you're working with to be able to explain a process to you.
Yes.
If
Yes.
they're like, oh, we're just going to show up and do something or whatever, like, that's,
Yeah.
at least for me, that wouldn't make me feel safe or supported.
Right. Right. I would also want to encourage people to ask a photographer, like, what's your philosophy
Hmm.
about, because I think that would also be telling. That would, like, if I said to you, Raj, what's your philosophy? You would get into all of this, and then I would
Right.
learn about
Yeah.
your mission and how you go about it. And I think that not just to kind of be passively listen, but also to be actively asking
Right.
to advocate for yourself. Like, because you want to, you don't, yes, we want great pictures, but let's also make it a great experience.
Yeah.
And when you know that you have someone that you're working with that has this client first attitude in
Hmm.
mind, and that they are there to help you bring out your vision. And if you don't know, that they're going to help elicit that
Yeah.
and provide you with ideas, but also that you want to know that they believe in creating
Hmm.
a safe environment. And you can even say to them, what are your thoughts about creating safety?
Yeah. I think that's
I'm,
so
I
important.
don't feel really comfortable. What do you do to help people feel
Yeah.
comfortable?
Yeah, and that's a great litmus test question.
Mhm.
Honestly, if somebody, you ask that question to a provider of any kind, and they get rattled by that, or don't have a good answer, or they've never thought about it, that's information too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then you can say, "Well, thank you," and then you can keep on looking, because it's worth it to find somebody who you feel this is gonna be a great experience, because if you feel great, it's you're gonna like, your pictures are gonna be that much better.
yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, right? So which is the next thing I wanted to get into, because you spoke about, when we talked earlier, about the balance between looking good and being yourself. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is such a loaded topic, because think about everything that goes into the idea of looking good, because there is so much messaging we get into in society and about what looking good means. Now, one thing, when clients bring that up, one thing I love to point out is that photography has been around for about 200 years. The first official photo we know of was taken in 1827 in France. In the first 150 years of those 200 years, photography was a very, very expensive pursuit. You needed fancy equipment, you needed dark rooms, you needed all kinds of stuff, which meant that it was available to mostly wealthy people, which among them, that means at that time mostly men, and globally mostly white men, which means that is that the aesthetic of what they desired, those people desired and thought was worthy of photography, still percolates today. Even though today photography you can think of as being democratized by cheap cameras and smartphones, those conventions of who or what looks good still comes to us today.
What are some of those things?
So think about, globally, what do we consider good looking? Like, as humans, we typically consider good looking as young, skinny, racially simply like light skin, flexible bodies, and bodies that meet certain standards, right? And those that's the way posing has evolved. The idea of posing is often designed to make those kinds of bodies look more attractive. Similarly, lighting, if you look at how lighting setups are designed and taught to photographers, they are designed for lighter skin tones. Editing conventions that we use, the Photoshop, the default filters on our phone or Instagram, etc., are calibrated to lighter skin. So if you're lighter skinned, you're going to look good and your skin tones are going to look good automatically. If not, then they're going to look like what some people call ashy or gray, and you might have to do something different. So much of the default is calibrated to making certain bodies look good. And we often assume that because we've grown up with that all our life, it's us, it's not the craft, right? Hi, Danielle. Good to see you. Uh, it's us, it's not the craft that's doing something wrong. So I want everyone to kind of take that message in for a bit. It's like just questioning, what does looking good mean? Right. Then we also, we have all these biases about weight, about age, about gender, all of that, right? Like, for example, we think of men being photographed in a certain way. Men have to be posed and lit in a certain way to make them look more strong and rugged. But photographers are always taught to photograph women in ways that make them look soft and gentle. And you're imposing these conventions on people, right? We just do it because we have grown up with them. Now, and that's the way, even when I started learning photography and started taking courses, those are the conventions I was taught. This is
Oh,
how
gosh.
men should look. This is how women should look.
It was actually taught in those courses?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, every course you can go pick up, go on Amazon and pick up, look any books on photography. They'll be posing for men, lighting for men, posing for women, lighting for women. This is what all women want to look gentle and ethereal and skinny. That's what
Okay,
you got to do.
so
Yeah.
then let's move into like what is being in contrast being yourself.
Right. So, my philosophy, going back to philosophy, is that the goal of a photo, and especially a branding photo, is not to make you look perfect or meet certain beauty standards. It's to build a connection with your audience. When you start focusing on what your audience is there for from you, and what is the story you want to tell them about yourself, you can start going past those conventions and worries about looking good. Because if you remember, ultimately your audience, and I'm sure you believe, you might agree with me there too, Linda, is that your audience is not there for whether you look perfect or not. They are there to learn a specific,
Yeah.
in your case, they are there to learn how to delight in the limelight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're there to learn about the skills you're going to teach them, the wisdom you have to offer, all of that. They don't care if you look like a supermodel.
I want to interject something that I had
Yeah,
a client who is in my Comfy on Camera class, which is not for taking photographs, but for speaking on camera. And she helps moms who are overwhelmed, stressed out, and feel like a hot mess.
yeah,
And she said, I feel like my videos aren't good enough because look at my hair and I don't have time to dress up. I said, that's how you wanna show up for your audience
right,
because that's how they feel.
yeah,
And if you show up that way, they're gonna feel seen. They're
yeah,
gonna feel recognized and understood. So don't go to the
yeah,
hairdresser before you get on video. No, do it just like you're
exactly.
doing. Yeah.
Exactly. A big part of building connection with anyone, any human being, including your audience, is or rather, two parts: empathy and vulnerability. Empathy is where you show you get them. You are in their shoes. You understand where they are. Vulnerability is I'm a real human being. I'm not just some, person on a pedestal who is perfect. Those are the two things. And that's the key to real connection with anyone, including your audience. So in my shoes, so when I talk about looking good versus being yourself, the being yourself part, it to me is about thinking about what's the story about yourself you want to tell. What are the different sides of yourself you're going to
Mm,
convey? Now, there
mm,
might be some sides of yourself that look more polished and professional, and that's great. But it also helps to show some sides of yourself that are a little less than that, a little not polished and a little not professional, as people would call it, because that humanizes you and that builds that when you show f- different facets of yourself, that's what portrays you as a real human. And I would rather focus on making thinking about what is the emotion that each photo that evokes, rather
mm.
than whether each photo looks good or looks perfect in a kind of societal standard way.
Right. So what it leads me to think about is how the importance of experimenting
Hmm.
and exploring and even playing
Yeah.
with the camera too, because we don't always know these things. I mean,
Hmm.
I have to admit that, I was just looking through my photos, and there are ones that I like better than others, and sometimes it's not just like this shape of my mouth when I'm smiling, but it's the energy that comes
Right.
across that I want, and some capture the energy and some seem a little kind of
Hmm.
flatter, but sometimes there are things that I might not think about putting out there, but someone else says, "What I love about this is it shows sincerity,"
Right.
or and it makes me feel like I can relax with you.
Yeah.
So and sometimes we don't know that for ourselves. So I
Hmm.
think that's why it's important to, like, explore all these things.
Right.
So, like, how will you have people explore on
Yeah.
camera?
Yeah. So that's so good that you said that, Linda, because uh, we are our own worst critics. Most of us are, we don't have a realistic idea of what other people love about us, including the people who actually love us. That's just a human thing.
I just wanna interrupt. I don't always think it's just criticism.
Hmm.
It's preconception or
Yeah.
conception, you know? It's just like what we think of as a standard that
Right.
we have narrow and someone else can widen that for us.
Right. Right. Right.
So continue. I just wanted to interject that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what I love telling my clients is that your photo sessions can be what I call an identity lab. It's can be a space just to play with parts of your identity before you put them out into the world. So I'll tell you a story about it. I had a client last year who is an executive in a big tech company, a black woman, and when we met for the first time, she said that she has been in tech and has risen up to the ranks of an executive for over and been in tech for over 20 years, and throughout that time she felt that she had to wear these gray suits and very muted outfits and all of that because that's what got her there, because she needed to fit in. Right. But now that she was in a certain position and she felt like she had nothing to prove to anyone, she was feeling this pull of like drawing from her cultural heritage. Her family is from the Caribbean and she grew up with these very colorful outfits and jewelry and all of that, and natural curly hair, and she was like, I don't want to just fit in anymore, but I'm also afraid. I've never done that before. I've never put myself out that way. So I don't know how people are going to perceive. Am I still going to be perceived as professional or an authority in what I do? So what I encouraged her to do was to bring her regular outfits to the sessions, but also bring a couple of those colorful outfits that she thought she wanted to wear and try out. So we did our shoot with the regular, we got the headshots and stuff we needed, and they're like, now it's time to play. Let's see what happens. And I was like, if you don't like it, if that doesn't feel good on your body, if you don't feel like you want to show the pictures, you don't have to show them ever to anybody. This is just for you. And so we did the session with those, we did the parts of those outfits. The photos turned out beautiful. She was so happy with them. And she was, after that, everything you see about her on Instagram, etc., is all color. Like it literally changed her aesthetic. And she was able to embrace that. Now, it could have gone the other way too. It could have gone being like, she might have worn that and been like, I don't feel quite this is right for me, or I'm not
Mhm.
ready for this yet. And
Yeah.
that is also fine.
Yeah.
But the point is, she got to play with her identity and kind of step into some different parts of herself in a safe space that which was not judgmental and which didn't need to be shared with the world. So it's kind of a lab to experiment. So I encourage all my clients and anyone who's ever doing a photo shoot, use that space to play with things that you have wanted to try out, any aspect of your identity, but you're not quite sure if you're ready to put it out there for everyone.
Yeah. That's great. Great. I have I was afraid to smile for most of my life because my mother told me that a tooth of mine looked ugly when I smiled.
Mm,
So I always contorted my mouth when I
right.
laughed, so I wouldn't show that part of my mouth, and when I was 35, a friend of mine said, "Linda, you have a beautiful smile, just let yourself smile." But by that time, I didn't know what it was to
Mm,
smile naturally because I'd been contorting my mouth for so long and feeling so self-conscious that I didn't know what that was. So I got in front of the mirror and I started to, smile and figure out, "Okay, what does this look like? It feels pretty good. Does it look like, it's like a natural smile?" And then I would turn away and I'd relax my face and I'd smile again and I'd turn back and then say, "Well, what does it feel like?" So I'm a big advocate of playing in front of the mirror
right.
and playing with expressions and
Yeah.
maybe even putting a video camera on and playing with expressions.
Yeah.
I know I recently posted a photograph that had me kind of like
Yeah.
this. And a friend of mine who is one of these perfectionists, she said, "How could you put that photo out? It's so unflattering." I said, "But that was the point. I wanted to share that feeling
Yeah.
that it's not always gonna be flattering, but it helps to play and have you can have the photography as a playground, but you can start playing before you get to the photo
Right.
session."
Yeah. And that's so brave of you to put that photo out there because yes, you get judged sometimes, but again, as a brand and a professional, you have to remember that photo is for a specific audience.
Yes.
It is to build that relationship. It is not necessarily for the whole world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
And
wasn't for that person.
right, it wasn't for that person, clearly. But the person who needed to get that message, that sometimes things that do not have to look flattering, got that message from you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what
So
matters.
I wanna end with, like, how do we bring our most fun-filled, open, and creative selves to make it a peak experience? So, I know I've had peak experiences. I think that I'd love to see more people feel
Mhm.
like the photo shoot was so much fun.
Yeah.
So give, I have a couple of ideas, but I wanna hear, what do you think are some quick elements that people can think about
Mhm.
to make their shoot fantastic for
Yeah.
themselves?
The first one I'm going to talk about is not going to be sexy to hear, but it is safety. Because when I find that safety is kind of the prerequisite to spontaneity and playfulness. You can only be playful and spontaneous when you feel safe to do it emotionally
Absolutely.
and physically. So that's ensuring safety by, whether it's apart from advocating for yourself or ensuring that the people you work with are the right people that you trust. So that's the one. The second thing I would say is have a plan. Again, it's really funny that everything I'm saying about playfulness comes from planning or like, but it's true. Planning again, like, if you're going on vacation, it helps to have a plan to actually enjoy your vacation. So similarly, think in advance of what are the things about yourself you want to convey. What's the story about yourself you want to tell? And what are the different sides? And plan, make sure your outfits, the props you bring to your session, everything are in support of that story. And that you can show, because so you're not kind of flailing around in the shoot and being like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't It's not stressful. It's like you once you have a plan and you execute the plan, then you have the room to play.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the third thing is make it collaborative. Like if something, when something works for you, celebrate that. When something doesn't work for you, then speak up and ask for something different.
Right.
Like most photographers, if you talk to them, they especially if they are true artists, they want that feedback. They
Yeah.
want that kind of, they want to feel validated and be like, oh, I'm doing the right thing, or oh, this is something different. So ask for things, brainstorm things, bring up your own ideas too,
Yeah.
and say, hey, let's try something this way, let's try
Yeah.
something that way.
Nice.
And so when you have all those three elements, you have safety, you have a plan, and then you're collaborative. That's when you create the space to that for that extra
Yeah.
pop.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I'm going to add a couple of things to that. So to enhance that. And one is to fill yourself up with your value. Yesterday, I had on Mary Tess Rooney, who talks about gathering and compiling all the things that make you feel valuable and worthy, all the things that you're talking about in that first bucket, Raj. And find ways to shift your energy into a place of whether it's gratitude or awe or wonder or curiosity, but practice bringing your some kind of higher vibration with you
Yeah.
that you can embody. And
Mhm.
then the last thing I want to share, and I'm going to take my glasses off for this, so that we can look at the lens with a relationship. We can create a relationship with the lens with how we look at it. We can look at it with appreciation, with curiosity,
Mhm.
with love, with um surprise, so that you can create your what your relationship is as if it's kind of like a person, because there is going to be a person on the other side
Yeah.
who's looking at it, and you are helping them to see you and feel you by the way you are letting the person on the other side
Yeah.
feel how you see them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That helps.
allow your eyes to really
Yeah.
connect with
Yeah.
that piece of plastic or glass or whatever it is, and let your heart open up to that.
Right.
So, like, bringing yourself to this higher vibration, this higher connection, that I see you and I feel you. I
Mhm.
feel you, I take you in, I appreciate you, thank you. Like, these are the ranges of experience that when you bring to the photo shoot, it's like an opportunity to get yourself high.
That's a cool way of putting it, but you're right. A peak.
That's
It
how I
can
see
be a
it. It's
peak
high
experience.
on the photo shoot, and you
Yeah.
have the capacity to bring all these qualities and elements in yourself that we all have these.
Yeah.
And yes, you want the safety, you want to feel worthy. That's why we clear all that stuff out of the way if we can. But in the moment, you want to bring all these things together so you can have this
Yeah.
amazing interaction.
Yeah. I want to add one thing to that,
Yes.
and that is the identity lab part, which is if you're up for it in your photo shoot, I would encourage you to try at least one thing that puts you slightly out of your comfort zone, right? And even if it's something new, it might sound scary, but if you do that, you get that high. It's an additional way of like, because you feel like, oh, I did that. I tried that. It doesn't matter whether I'm going to share that photo or not, but I tried that new thing. And that's an extra kind of dopamine hit you give yourself for accomplishing this thing that might have scared you a little bit.
Yeah. 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 Fantastic. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I love this topic. I
Yeah.
love this topic. I feel like it yeah, it's totally parallel with how we speak, how we feel ourselves even without speaking, just in front of the camera, and expressing ourselves through our body, through our energy, through our expression. And what a thrill that we have this technology that can capture that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so cool, it's fun, it's beautiful, and uplifting. So thank you for sharing in all this with me, Raj. I really appreciate that. And so how can people learn more about you? You live in New York.
I live in New
Do you
York.
also travel?
I do travel. I travel a lot to San Francisco, but I'm also open to traveling to other places. I've kind of set myself a thing like if I have two or more clients in a city, I'm happy to go there.
Mhm.
So reach out no matter where you are. Yeah, that's my website, seriesaphotography.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and feel free to connect with me in any way. I'm always happy to chat, and I love listening to people's stories. Everyone just has such a fantastic story.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I am so delighted for all of you who have either come on live, thank you so much, or are listening to this or watching the replay, and we are here to help you delight in the limelight. So be sure to get notifications by subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, Linda. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Raj. Bye bye.
Bye.